Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by RaceForThePrize.com Indianapolis Cup Series. It's the Sunday show. Who's excited? Everybody's excited for Indy, the Brickyard. Let's go over the fantasy picks. And as always, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App if you would like to get access to the beautiful data on your screen. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Indy, what was my advice earlier in the week? Pocono, what was my advice earlier in the week? Don't get married to practice laps. That being said, we're looking at practice laps. You guys like to look at practice laps? We'll look at practice laps. Here it is. It's in the spreadsheet. Eat it up. Don't completely ignore it, but don't get completely married to it. Why do I say that? Because legitimately, the top 25 cars should all stay on the lead lap, opening the door for restarts at the end, and they move forward. Everybody is in this race. And if we look a little bit closer, we'll take their 15 best laps, average them out. And one of the things you're going to see is basically we come right here about the 17th place. There's not a huge difference between around 17th and 28th. So legitimately, all these drivers from here, from Todd Gilliland up to AJ Allmendinger, could finish in 17th place based on their speed and practice. Don't get married to practice. I'm just doing this to illustrate a point, and I pointed this out before Pocono and after Pocono in the podcast, that you really can throw a blanket over all these cars. They're going to hang on to the lead lap. They're all pretty equal. There is parity. Every one of those drivers has a shot at, at least 17th. More than likely, a 15th place finish, a top 15. Anyone in the top 30 today and a Pocono has a very legit shot. And so some people are going to run to the practice speed and say, oh, well, he was 2/10 faster, so he's going to be my play. Some people are going to say, oh, just take the place differential. I'm not going to fault you either way. I think I would rather just chase the place differential, knowing that the speeds are all about the same from all of these drivers, that any of them, based on the equipment they have over the season at this specific racetrack type, can get a top 15. Then you add in restart madness, attrition spots gained at least, let's say 5. Now we're talking about one of these jokers getting the top 10. Now, obviously, Nemechek getting the top 10, starting 10, doesn't do much for us. But Gilly, Zane, even Jimmy Johnson can't get a top 10. We'll talk about that later. But if we think all these cars are about the same and the way that this race is going to play out, why not? Yeah, he hasn't had the greatest season ever. But that's at different tracks, different situations, equipment that was clearly inferior, lack of experience in the Gen 7 car. You put yourself in this specific situation at Indy, he's got a shot. He really does. Any of these cars can do it. Now, the immediate reaction when we go over this is, all right, let's go chase place differential. It's not wrong. It's what we said for Pocono. It's what we're going to say again this week. We know how it's going to play out. Top 25 should stay on lead lap. Top 25-ish are all about the same speed. Well, 15 through 25 are all about the same speed. Anyone could default into that 15 spot. They're going to gain place differential. Probably want double-digit PD. So who are the first names that we are going to run to? Again, there's your speed. So we'll just go ahead and sort it by qualifying and say, all right, we're chasing place differential. Yes, we will play some hogs or dominators. Even though I don't know if domination's the race word we want to use. How dominant are you if you just have clean air at Indy? Regardless, someone will hog the points. But then at the same time, we could see, which we have seen in the past, pit road cycling of the lead, people pitting at different times, stage flipping, pitting before caution, staying out. A new guy inherits the lead, benefits from the clean air, and runs away. And then we get a caution, we cycle someone else, so you get another hog. But for the most part, those hogs are more than likely going to be these guys with a little bit more speed. We talk about 15, 25 being the same. There is a clear differentiation between your top 5, your top 10, your top 15. Now, those are the halves. They have pretty good equipment. But even in that subcategory of the front pack, top 15, there are clearly some fast cars that are starting up front, which we would circle around for being fast. All right, let's talk about the first place differential guy you're likely going to jump to, and it's going to be Chris Buescher. Practice laps are great, but practice laps, tell your practice laps to shut up. Yeah, I should tell them to shut up, but I'm not going to completely ignore them. And here's a hot take on practice laps. The laps, they just tell us the difference between the haves and have-nots. Again, I'll flip it onto the screen here. We'll go look again at the top 15 best laps, like you could see before. So we do get an idea of like the extremely good teams, but what it really gives us an idea is, and then we can also look at their 5 best laps. We can see a clear top 15, the haves, the contenders, and then we can see the pretenders. And the pretenders can get top 15s, can benefit from attrition and get into the top 10, but we don't expect any of these crew to win races. For the most part, practice laps don't tell us too much between, Reddick and Larson and Hamlin and even Buescher. But it does tell us who are the haves and have-nots. It does tell us who can be elite, who can lead laps. Now, at other racetracks, it'll tell us more. And at some tracks, the practice laps tell us less. But for Pocono and Indy, really just gives us a differentiation between contenders and pretenders. You can look at the data and say, all right, these guys can win, battle, lead laps. And then these are the guys that are looking for top 15. And when you really try to look between the two, you notice like, man, they're about the same. Not much separating Harrison Burton this week in his laps versus Jimmy Johnson versus Todd Gilliland versus McDowell. I think that says a lot for this track. Okay, going back. I don't even know if that's a big hot take. But yeah, you're playing Buescher. You want to avoid Buescher ownership? We'll talk more about ownership in a second. Just because it gets brought up occasionally. So practice will sway people towards Buescher, but also he really deserves that spot. Went from 18th to 11th last week at Pocono, similar racetrack. Similar style racetrack, I suppose, and similar a lot of ways. 18th to 11th, he was optimal. We know that RFK have been very good at strategy races. Expect them to have a game plan. They'll be fine. All right, so the next one, the elephant in the room, we're going to talk about Carson Hocevar. Hocevar's going to give you value. Hocevar starting in the back. Hocevar, lap-wise, best 15 laps. It's his top 15 car. I wanted to say truck. 5 lap average, not 5 lap average, best 5 laps. Again, top 15. Look at the last 7 races, 6 of them he's finished 17th or better. He's around the top 15 driver this year. So that's what we all know, and that's all the good stuff. What's the bad stuff? Revenge is always a dish best served cold. It's always in the back of our mind when we roster guys like Carson Hocevar, Ross Chastain, and Kyle Busch. Maybe not so much Kyle Busch, but revenge is a thing. Hocevar has been rubbing people the wrong way everywhere since day one, same as Ross Chastain. And yet, you can look at Chastain's illustrious and storied career. He's never really received all that much payback. A couple times with Hamlin, but that's Hamlin. For the most part, Chastain's never really got what's coming to him. Think about it. Look at Hocevar. For the most part, never really got what's coming for him. And he's been doing some dirty stuff in the trucks for a while. There's been a couple incidents. But if you look at the incidents that happen with Hocevar and with Chastain, when revenge and payback was realized, you know what happened, don't you? And so they don't often have to pay the price. You know why? Because they're both stupid and they're both crazy. Anytime someone tries to pay back Hocevar, or anytime someone tries to pay back Ross Chastain, and I know we're saying, what's the point of all this? Well, we're talking about the fear of Hocevar getting wrecked. He's starting in the back, everything checks out. As long as he doesn't wreck, he should be fine. But we have the fear that someone's going to pay him back, but no one never really does pay him back, because when he has been paid back a little bit, same thing with Chastain, they're crazy, they're stupid. So put yourself in the mind of the shoes of another driver. Put your helmet on. You're going to go, oh, I'm going to teach that kid a lesson. Are you? No, you're not. One, the kid won't listen. You're not going to teach him anything. He's not going to change. So you think that through your mind, like, if I try to teach him a lesson, he's probably not even going to learn. Next thing, you know what he's going to do when you try to teach him a lesson. Being the spoiled brat that he is, or that Chastain is. He's just an aggressive driver. Spoiled brat. What's the difference? Aggressive or brat? It all depends on your perspective, whether it's your guy or not. If you try to teach Hocevar a lesson, he's just going to wreck you. He's going to take you down with him. You know that. And so what is your approach? Your approach is going to be, you know what? I think I just let someone else teach the lesson. So you point to someone else and say, hey, you do it. And they point to someone else and they say, you do it. And no one ever does it. And Hosper never pays back. So circle back to where we began. Are you as worried about revenge coming to Hosper now after my little story time? Maybe, maybe not. I think it was a decent explanation. Bubba, next one on the board. He may not be starting the furthest from the front, but we know last week he was optimal and chalky. He is still affordable. He has a lot more speed than maybe some he's up there with Buescher. But we know the Toyotas run well at this type of track. We know that he should be able to run inside the top 10 all day as long as he doesn't have restart madness problems. A little bit more upside. I like Bubba a lot in this spot. I could see him even creeping closer into the top 10 as we've seen Toyota's got speed. And it's not a track where I think that his skill set really suffers. And it's also not a track where anyone else's skill set necessarily elevates them higher, especially in the top 10. So definitely get on board with Bubba. All right, next guy that we got to talk about will be Kyle Busch. Affordable. Starting in the back. Speeds, all top 15s. Oh, I got a scratchy voice. All right, we're good. The speed's there. Speed's usually always there. Mechanical failures and wrecks are what worry us. I don't hesitate to believe that he has top 15 speed. I believe he does. So easily, if he doesn't wreck, he'll be fine. It just comes down to luck. What about his ownership? Okay, so as far as ownership goes, it is kind of silly at times. NASCAR ownership is another, just I think, a mistake of people playing DFS and then just trying to transport everything they learned from other sports onto this sport without really thinking about it. And I would say me doing early shows and whatever and early content may have helped create that problem about a decade ago, and we still do it. I have reflected much more over the last, 6, 7 years and said, maybe focusing on ownership is not really that wise because we're just talking about different sports. Other sports, you have larger player pools. You have alternative picks that you can go to. This is a small pool. There aren't really any alternatives. There's no position eligibility variables at work. And I always say, well, if guy's high owned and something happens, then I don't have him, I win. Or if guy's low owned and I have him. Look, you win if he wins. You didn't win because of the ownership. That's that. The ownership conversation that we could have and discussion is not going to affect whether he doesn't wreck or not. If Kyle Busch does not wreck, it doesn't matter what his ownership is. He's in the winning lineup. We could discuss ownership all day of Kyle Busch, starting 34th. It's not going to matter at all when it's said and done. What's going to matter is, does he wreck or not? And if he doesn't, then you needed him. And if he does have another bad Kyle Busch day, then you didn't want him. It didn't matter what his ownership was. There's no pivots in a 500-player pool with multi-position eligibility in different lineup constructions. That just doesn't exist in NASCAR. It does to a tiny bit, to a tiny degree. All right, that's enough about that. Does he wreck or not? Ask yourself right now. If he doesn't, it's hard to believe that he doesn't get to 15th. Hard to believe. Jimmy Johnson right there, $6,000. We don't want to fall in love with practice speeds. But, nope, anything he says before the but, you can just ignore, right? This isn't the way it works. And, so we don't want to fall in love with practice speeds. And, well, I wanted to say something contrarian. Okay. Start over. The practice speeds check out. They do. I know. Oh, we're doing back to practice. Don't believe in practice. Believe in practice. Well, at the very least, with practice, if you want to downgrade it as much as possible, you're going to see that he has at least top 25 speed. He is in that group contingent of cars in the mid-pack. Maybe he's at the back of the mid-pack, but he's in it. He's on the lead lap. He'll be there at the end. He's got more experience in the Gen 7 car, and I would argue this is a track where his lack of experience in the Gen 7 car is mitigated for the most part. We're just running down straight stretches. A lot of his poor results because he's been doing rando schedules. It's pretty simple. Run the flat straightaways, or get into the turns right. Don't wreck on restarts. Very capable of getting up in that top 15. Getting the attrition bonus. Could finish anywhere in the teens. Starting 33, $6,000. Why not? Let's just keep walking up the grid. So we got Hemrick and Priest. Speeds aren't there. Do we want to overreact to practice? These are two drivers that I think are on the fringe of not being in that, obviously 33, 34, when we lap out their 15s, 34, 32. And we can look at the speed fall off pretty quickly. They're a little bit too deep for me. But am I ignoring my own advice of ignoring practice? No. Remember what I said with Buescher. Practice at the very least gives us an idea of the haves, the have-nots, and then really the no-shots. Haves, have-nots, no-shots. And you could put a pretty good argument on Priest and Hemrick that they're no-shots. But if we get enough chaos, they could come to life, to the point that I wouldn't completely write them off. But I don't really want to start building here. I'll go here if I have to. Talked about Hocevar. Jones is in similar light. Just as fast. Maybe not nearly enough baggage or as much baggage. Don't care about practice that much. But he's fast just enough. Should be able to hang on to the lead lap. Always gets more out of his car. Always gets more out of what it has in practice. No doubt another driver that can finish top 15. If we're chasing place differential, we're going to guys in the back. Ross Chastain. Basically just superimpose my Carson Hocevar talk over on the Chastain. And you can maybe make an argument at this point that Hocevar is running better than Chastain, or at least has better equipment than Chastain. There are concerns. What's going on with Trackhouse Entertainment Group? Not really producing the fast cars that we'd like to see. But if aggressive restarts is the name of the game, well, Ross Chastain's right up there. And when we look at these other guys with 15 upside, he definitely has top 10 upside just based on what he can do. You have to pay a little bit more. I wouldn't fault you if you don't need to go there. Obviously, you're going to lean toward Busch. Maybe go to Buescher. Hocevar is going to be popular. Oh, yeah, we got Josh Berry way back here and Austin Cindric way back here as well. Don't really even need to discuss those guys. They've got the top 15 speed. They're starting dead last. 7,500, 7,600. We are chasing place differential. We are chasing place differential. Repeat. All these drivers can get into the top 15. Penske's really shown up with a lot of speed. The SHR4s aren't great, but they're top 20. They're top 15. They showed you the speed they need. Don't wreck, Barry. Don't wreck, Cindric. Do I need to explain that too deeply? So those guys are going to carry everything. Busch is going to carry everything. I like Johnson. Hocevar. Like Hocevar. It's just simply this Daytona light, yes. This Daytona's Talladegas. Jones, yes. Ross Chastain. So, just similar to a regular Daytona build, isn't it? Zane Smith's still going to be alive at 27th. He's just right there on that fringe. Just fast enough. Should be to hang in there. You don't love it. You feel more confident in some of these other guys to really be able to make the move at the end of the race, make the push at the end of the race. But that could really be over-exaggerated when it simply is more of, well, who doesn't wreck? Who doesn't barrel into the turn and get taken out? Who just is fine and dandy at the very end and safe and clean? Brett Keselowski, you're going to pay up more, but you get a driver who thrives on strategy races, got enough speed here to be into the top 10, will play games and cycle to the lead if he gets the opportunity. Difference between him and pretty much most of the drivers that we've already discussed is he definitely has top 10 speed, I would argue, whereas other guys, some have top 15 speed, and others are just kind of back there with all the mid-pack, hoping that they make the right moves. And the cautions fall at the right time. They cycle to the right time. As we get a little bit close to the front, you're going to lose out on that place differential. And that's a sacrifice you can make if you can gain it on the finishing position. I don't think you gain it with Suarez. But again, can he get a top 15? Yep. Is that 10 place differential points? Yep. As long as these guys don't come through. Well, there are so many of these guys in the back that could top 16, top 17, top 18 at slightly better prices, maybe slightly more efficient. So not only does Suarez have to succeed, he needs some of the other guys in the back not to. Whereas Barry and Cindric can work, and Suarez can work as well, but Barry and Cindric, based on the place differential, will leapfrog. So, if you're looking at the flow chart, you only need two things to happen. Or you need two things to happen for Suarez. He has to succeed, and we need these guys to fail. Whereas if I pick Cindric, if he succeeds, good. It doesn't matter what Suarez does. Todd, same situation, but you can get a little bit of savings. We don't quite have the upside that we want. And again, you need him to succeed, and you need others to fail. That's a double bet. You're betting on two outcomes. Good luck with that. Again, speed's enough. He's kind of on that fringe, but I would expect Indianapolis, Gillen, that front row car, not truck, to run inside the top 10, 15, or be able to finish 15th. Stay on to the lead lap back in 25th. Be there at the end. He has the capability. Will he do it? Will he get involved in the wreck? Will he make a mistake? Yeah, I would say, if we're talking about mistakes, I would say Gilly's probably more likely than Jones to mess up. Once we start getting up to Ty Dillon's a no-go from me. Gregson and Briscoe, maybe you can make an argument that they have, based on track position, the ability to finish a little bit closer to the front. But I think at this point, you're sacrificing too much place differential. They may have higher upside in terms of finishing position. Say he gets a top 10, and that's 10 place differential points. Well, I think I would rather have a top 15 and 20 place differential points. Just math, folks. That's all that one is. So yeah, higher upside, but it's all kind of limited. His ultimate score is going to be limited because he's just starting a lot closer to the front than some of the other drivers that have comparable speed, have just enough of an opportunity. It's just the way that this race plays out. I mean, if this was a different intermediate track, we'd have a different story. We wouldn't be so in love with place differential. But I believe restarts, pitting, cautions, a lot of unknowns, that drivers, and the fact that, like I illustrated before, 17th through 28th are all about the same. Joy too close. We can go ahead and scratch Stenhouse, Nemechek, Dillon, these guys up front that really don't have the greatest speed. But even if they are faster than what we think, even if Michael McDowell really is a good car this weekend, you're just not getting the place differential. And I find it really hard to imagine that this race plays out in the way that place differential isn't loaded up, given all the drivers in the back. There's just too many guys in the back that these guys could have phenomenal days. And it's just not going to matter, because when we look at our scoring buckets, which are finishing position points, hog points, fast and lap sled points, and then our third and final bucket, which is place differential, they only have access to really one. That's finishing position points. So give them 40 fantasy points from finishing position. Give them a great day. They're not leading laps. There's a 0. They can't score any place differential. There's a 0. Whereas you don't need these guys in the back to do that much. Just don't wreck. And they're going to throw points into the finishing position bucket. Maybe not as much. Maybe 30. But then they can also throw in points into the place differential bucket. 15, 20, 12. Just give them 12. Hey, you just scored more than any of these guys, and they're likely going to lose points through their finishing position bucket. That pretty much solves it. I guess, as I mentioned, Bubba Wallace, I'm not as high on Christopher Bell. I'd rather just take the similar play in Bubba Wallace. If you think Christopher Bell can win this race, then you play Christopher Bell. That's the story there. If you think he can finish top 3, then you consider him. Don't expect him to lead laps or run fast laps. And it's not going to be easy for him to get through track position wise and really push up there. Now, if you think he can get into the top 5 and mix things up, well, the same thing I would ask you is, well, what about Chris Buescher? Well, I think that Chris actually can do it. And that Chris is 5 spots further back. And that Chris is, $1,200 cheaper. And then there's Brad Keselowski. So, again, with the Christopher Bell situation, if you're playing him, and there's a place differential opportunity there, he's definitely going to constrain your lineup in terms of price. But he has to succeed, and he also needs Buescher and Keselowski to fail for that lineup construction to work. Whereas I can take Keselowski, and Bell can have a good day. It's not going to hurt me because I've got the place differential points in my back pocket. Same thing with Buescher. That's where I would rather go. Now, up towards the front, as we close out, who's going to lead the most laps? Again, these are our haves versus have-nots. And even when that subcategory of halves, we got some really good speed with Reddick. We've got some really good speed with Hamlin, Elliott, Byron, and Larson, and Blaney. Pick and choose. They're all fast enough to lead laps. Who's going to be better on restarts? Who's going to cycle to the lead? Who's going to maintain throughout the entire day? Practice laps are not going to tell you how this race is going to completely play out. Current form, track history, those are going to help you make an informed decision. I guess the next question as we wrap up is, how many of these drivers do I want in my lineup? 2 or 3? More than likely, you're going to end up with 2. Maybe you even go down to 1 if you want to go all in on place differential and play this like Daytona. You can get a 1 and 5 PD chases, fine by me. 2, probably where I am leaning, especially given that these guys are affordable. Pricing's pretty soft. And we do not expect one guy to just lead all the laps and run all the fast laps. We go to the last Indy race. You got a bunch from Harvick. You got a good chunk from Elliott. And then Hamlin got wrecked in that Harvick situation. You had a bunch there. Now, it's 15. Not a whole lot. We go to last week's Pocono. I think that's a good idea. There's a hog. There's a hog. Even there's a hog, but they get you place differential. I guess the better question is, do I want to start a hog starting up front? You'll need one. You're going to need one of those drivers. I find it hard to imagine that one of those drivers is not in the optimal lineup. And I honestly believe that we will probably get 2 of them because they are affordable. And they're going to get enough, a little bit of place differential, a little bit of finishing position, or all maxed out finishing position. 15 to 20 hog points. They get there. I like 2, but I haven't played around too much with lineup construction yet. But we know we need at least 4 place differentials, 5 place differentials, maybe. Gun to my head. Who am I taking amongst this crew? It's going to be Hamlin. Restarts, pit road, strategy, I'll take Hamlin. Pick number 2, I'll just lean into Reddick because I think he's going to get the laps at the very beginning. Maybe not. Yeah, he should. He's not just going to concede to the boss. Actually, give me Larson. Give me Larson number 2. It's Indianapolis. Maybe that's in the back of his head. Like he's getting his second chance at it. Get you a little bit of place differential. Not too expensive. Speed is there. Pit crew team's always pretty good. Good on restart. Smart team. I'll get Larson number 2. Now, as we wrap up, this is kind of taking me to another point. Because it is difficult to choose between these drivers, I think most DFS players are going to say, well, I don't want to choose 2. I'll just pick 1 and go place differential. That means maybe a better route to build is 2 and then 4 place differential if you're concerned about ownership and being different. I would imagine that most people given this hard choice between the very top, say, it's just easier to chase place differential. Give me 1 and 5. So how about you try to be 2 and 4, which has a very good chance of being optimal already. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for joining me. The treadmill ruck is about to come to an end, and the beeps are about to happen, and the guy's about to complain, so I got to wrap it up really quickly. RaceForThePrize.com, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Thanks for joining me. Blessed to have you guys around. Love you guys. Trip to life, fantastic.